Surviving, Michael Jackson presents Nocturnal Admissions, Episode 6, The Books of Lies.
They found photographs, books of young boys who were undressed.
No,
Didn't happen.
no, not that I know of, unless people sent me things that I haven't opened. Lies, 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 lies. Because there wasn't one piece of information that says I did that. In any way, they turned my room upside down, went through all my books, all my videotapes, all my private things, and they found nothing that can say Michael Jackson did this. Nothing.
But let me ask you
To
a
this
couple
day,
of questions.
nothing. Still nothing.
Let me ask
Nothing,
you a couple.
nothing. Lies, 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 lies.
One item that we found in the locked filing cabinet was a book showing nude boys in nude poses. It's not illegal. It's a book that I've seized in other investigations. If it's a person who has this material, who has a sexual interest in children, it becomes child erotica.
The issue is whether or not he was getting sexual gratification from the association with young boys, and this is something that the judge has allowed the jury to consider regarding that fact.
I understand, but this is not a sexual book. There is no sexual...
Do you want me to start showing pictures on camera? For God's
Be
sake?
my guest. Be my guest. Why don't you show your viewers? Let's go. Let's take the book. We can start showing it to your viewers. And let's see if this is these books are sexual.
Okay.
Pull them all out.
All right.
Pull them all out.
Guys,
These
I
books-
don't want to get in trouble.
Well,
Let's do this.
that's been shown.
Yeah.
That's been shown. That is, I mean,
Well,
that's not my
this is
style.
all the way
That's
through.
not sexual.
You and I can argue all you want.
But then there was this, dark side to the story that was never revealed to the public. That a lot was revealed to me. During the investigation of the trial, Detective Robel went out to see Frank and me to our homes, and Frank hands me a bag, and there was a child pornography video ordering section in the magazine that was in the bag, with Sharpie circles around the videos to be ordered. So once again, I'm in this big situation with Frank and in this trial, and I go and I confront Frank, and he says, "Yeah, then we sat down and we ordered, the videos were ordered. Michael circled them, the videos he wanted, he selected them, and we were going through a phase together, and we were watching these videos of naked families and naked children prance around." So you start to put the pieces to the puzzle together, and the victimization and the sexual abuse came out over the years. I always, said, "Frank, you're denying it. I know it's something very hard for him to come forward."
There was a photo shoot that I did of Jordan that Michael paid for. We killed it. It's gone. Doesn't exist.
The people seek to introduce numerous homosexual and heterosexual picture books, videos and magazines, seized on November 13, 2003, from the defendant's master bedroom, suite at Neverland Valley Ranch, the video arcade, and from room adjoining the defendant's private office in a security building. The people also seek to admit 3 hardcover books and 2 photographs seized from defendant's bedroom at Neverland Ranch by the Los Angeles Police Department in August 1993. The first book, Boys Will Be Boys, containing photographs of boys under the age of 14. Full frontal nudity. The book is personally inscribed by Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson writes, "Look at the true spirit of happiness and joy in these boys' faces. This is the spirit of boyhood, a life I never had and will always dream of. This is the life I want for my children." The book that Michael Jackson adored so much was edited by Georges Saint Martin and Ronald C. Nelson. But don't try to look up those names, because they are pseudonyms for Martin Swithenbank, a convicted child predator, and founding member of NAMBLA, and Ronald Drew, a convicted teacher who was indicted for selling CP. But yet, Michael Jackson loved their work.
Welcome to Surviving Michael Jackson tonight, as we present episode 6 of our ongoing series, Michael Jackson Nocturnal Admissions. This particular episode is entitled The Books of Lies. And what this particular episode is going to be looking at is the books that Michael Jackson had in his possession and some of the other photographic evidence that was found, as well as magazines and the possible destruction of evidence by one of his photographers. This particular episode is not going to be an easy one, so I am going to issue a trigger warning on this particular episode. Besides going and looking into the various books and magazines and pictures that were seized at Michael Jackson's various residences, it really is more so about grooming and how a lot of these materials that were seized in many ways were used. And they were used essentially to lower the inhibitions of these children. We're also going to be looking at the information that was presented by Vincent F. Amen, in which he talks about how Frank Cassio was instructed to order various videotapes of nudist families and videos of both men, women, and children in the nude. Again, I also think that this really was a way of lowering children's inhibitions and to somehow, tell them that this was natural and this was something that families always do. And also, Vincent did mention that for some reason there was a phase that him and Michael Jackson were looking at these videos. But I think it goes far more than just that. So this is going to be a fairly deep dive in this particular episode of Nocturnal Missions. And again, I thank you for watching. So let's start with this book, a book that we can all assume that Michael Jackson probably had multiple copies of. It's J.M. Barrie's book, Peter Pan. The reason why I am bringing this particular book up first is because there's been theories about the author of this book, J.M. Barrie, and why he may have written Peter Pan and what his thoughts were when it comes to wanting to be a child forever and live in Never Never Land. So let's take a look at Mr. J.M. Barrie and a theory that I find rather interesting when it comes to this particular author and his works. So this is an article entitled Children of the Pool, written by Tony Smith. And it states, when J.M. Barrie, now remember J.M. Barrie is the author of Peter Pan, when he was 6 years old, his elder brother David, age 13 and the favorite son, was killed in a skating accident. Grief-stricken, their mother retired to her darkened bedroom and stayed there day after day, sometimes weeping, often with the christening robe in which all her children had been baptized, clasped in her arms. Young Jamie struggled to replace his dead brother in his mother's affections, waiting hopelessly outside her room, but he was repeatedly rejected. The loss of his mother's affection was, says Dr. Frazier, the experience which led to Barrie's psychosexual development, being frozen in early childhood, and to his writing Peter Pan. The death of Narcissus is, however, more than another center through the familiar country of psychological interpretations of literature. As a psychiatrist, Morris Frazier is concerned with patients, and it is humanity that has led him to develop a theory of pedophilia sexual attraction to children, based on an assessment of life and works of among others, Barry, Lewis, Carroll, Henry James, and Hugh Walpole. Dr. Fraser argues that sexual inversion is generally due to a combination of an unsatisfied overattachment to the mother and the father who is absent or emotionally remote. The time at which the child realizes emotional plight is critical, for at that moment his affection becomes turned inward onto himself, leading in later life to an obsession with children of that age. The child of the pool is a narcissistic fantasy takes on the qualities of an ideal self. Detailed examinations of both the lives and writings of his subjects allowed Dr. Fraser to persuade us that with more or less insight into their psychological state, these writers found solace in their fantasies for the stress caused by their attraction to children. Possibly, he says, gifted and imaginative children who are emotionally deprived may become aware of their isolation at an unusually early age, and so may be more likely to become fixed on very young love objects. More commonly, the crucial inversion occurs later, so explaining the rarity of pedophilia. In general terms, he believes that this interpretation can play an important part in explaining the nature of their inversion to less articulate sufferers, helping to reduce both their guilt and their potential for abhorrent behavior. Informed discussion of pedophilia and its therapy is certainly needed, for it has been one of the most neglected variants of abnormal sexuality. So obviously the psychiatrist that's being quoted in this particular article is looking at this particular subject in a very clinical way. I don't know if I agree with all of his findings, but what I think is rather interesting is the idea that in many ways some of these predators have a fixation on their mother and have a either neglectful father or a distant or abusive father, and they internalize this. The other thing I find rather interesting is this idea of the child of the pool, where one is looking into the image of oneself and trying to be the perfect or ideal self. I think Michael Jackson definitely epitomizes this, especially when we look at him trying to recreate himself via plastic surgery, and also trying to be this particular perfect performer, and perfection being the main goal. I really do find this particular article rather interesting when it comes to Michael Jackson. I wanted to put this in there so we can begin to look at some of the other aspects of this story when it comes to Michael Jackson, and again, some of the books that he owned and some of the photographic evidence that was found. So let's now look into that. So this is a book entitled Boys Will Be Boys. It was edited by two individuals, and they were credited as Georges St. Martin and Ronald C. Nelson. However, like I said earlier, if you try to look up those names when it comes to this particular publication, you won't find really any information because those names are pseudonyms. The first person, Georges St. Martin, is actually a man by the name of Martin Swithenbank. And the second person, Ronald C. Nelson, is actually a man by the name of Ronald Drew. Now, Martin Swithenbank was actually one of the founding members of NAMBLA, North American Man-Boy Love Association. And Ronald Drew was actually a New York teacher who was arrested and indicted for selling obscene photographs of children. Now, what I want to point out here is that this book was found in a locked filing cabinet in Michael Jackson's home. And not only was it in a locked filing cabinet, it had an inscription written by Michael Jackson, which he states, "Look at the true spirit of happiness and joy in these boys' faces. This is the spirit of boyhood, a life I never had and will always dream of. This is the life I want for my children." Now, what I also find interesting is that Martin Swithenbank and Ronald C. Nelson, or Ronald Drew as his real name, also wrote a sort of a description of the book where they wrote, "Any parent, educator, social worker, anyone who enjoys boys and the fun of boys will treasure these magnificently reproduced photographs and will return to them again and again. For this haunting yet happy book is a permanent celebration not only of boyhood, but the eternal springtime of the human spirit." So as you can see, these are just some examples of the vile pictures that were in this book, which have obviously been censored. But in these books, they are not blacked out. And this particular book was published by a publisher called Book Adventures, which was really owned by Martin Swithenbank. And it was also connected to another publisher called Sun and Health Ltd. And what was strange about that particular publisher is that they were really big on magazines that involved nudists, which we will get into a little bit later. But what I want to stress here is that these books were made and intended for a specific audience. And because Martin Swithenbank was a founding member of NAMBLA and an admitted what he would call a boy lover, he edited books and put out books like this, which was being marketed to what he called his other boy lover friends. What I found rather interesting was the publishing company that he owned, Book Adventures, essentially went out of business. Now, they had put out 2 books. The first book was called The Boy, and then it was this book here, Boys Will Be Boys. But the reason why he said that the company went defunct was because there was not enough boy lovers out there to buy the material, or people that had an interest, like he had an interest in these particular photographs. Now, one would have to ask, if there is such a small subset of individuals that would be interested in a publication like this, why did Michael Jackson have it in a locked filing cabinet with an inscription? Now, he had both books, but he had this particular book, Boys Will Be Boys, in a locked filing cabinet with an inscription. And usually when you write an inscription, it usually means you're giving the book to somebody else. But supposedly this book was given to him by a person by the name of Rhonda, and certain initials were capitalized. And the belief was that Rhonda was actually Ronald Nelson. That was the other person who was the editor of this book, who was a teacher from New York who got arrested for essentially selling indecent, or what we call CP. And I find it rather interesting that Michael Jackson wrote such a glowing review of this book and used a lot of the same verbiage. Instead of saying, he enjoyed the pictures of these children, and that it reminded him of his childhood. No, he talked about boyhood in exact same words that were used by the editors of this book. I just find it rather strange. And I said this once before, usually when a person has a book like this, it's called a coffee table book, where you would have maybe a picture of something that you're interested in. So if you're interested in, I don't know, beaches of the world, you would have a book of various beaches from all over the globe, and you would put that out in your coffee table, and you could have a discussion with people about why you're so, enamored with various, beaches in the world, and why that interests you. But this particular book was hidden away. You would think that Michael Jackson, if he was so proud of this book and so just thought it was such a wonderful thing, that he would proudly display it. But he didn't. And the biggest argument, which I find it laughable, is that this is an art book. It's a photography book. And it's, there's nothing sexual in this book. But if you look at the picture on the left corner, that's actually taken from a still from Court TV. And what the commentator was trying to show there was that that's a boy that's essentially spread eagle, like you would see in like a Playboy magazine being photographed. And the idea is, just because he is not doing something, overtly sexual, that somehow that's a creative piece of art, which is just ridiculous. It's the same argument that they used for Brooke Shields when some creepy photographer took nude pictures of her when she was 11, and then somehow it wound up in a Playboy publication called Sugar and Spice. There is no redeeming quality to any of these pictures. What it's showing really is exploitation packaged in an art form. So this is a picture of Michael Jacobshagen, and in his hand he's holding a copy of the book called The Boy, a photographic essay. Now that book's actually a very rare book, and it's quite pricey. Again, as we noted before, the publisher, Book Adventures, went out of business. This was actually the first book that they published. They only published 2. And again, this was edited by the same people that edited the last book we talked about, Martin Swithenbank and Ron Nelson. Now, shortly I'm going to show you a video of Michael Jacobshagen describing how he acquired this book, and also how they looked. There was actually writing by Michael Jackson in the book, allegedly, but they actually brought it to somebody who is an expert in writing and signatures, who verified that it was authentic and that Michael Jackson, in his opinion, actually had wrote in that particular book. In the previous segment, I discussed how in the book Boys Will Be Boys that they found in a locked filing cabinet, there was an inscription written by Michael Jackson describing the book. In this particular book, The Boy, that Michael Jacobshagen is holding, that is his book, and he said it was inscribed by Michael Jackson and given to him when he was a boy. Michael Jacobshagen met Michael Jackson in the 90s when he was still a child. The thing, again, that's rather interesting is that he would have a copy of this particular book and also a relationship with Michael Jackson. Now, for note, there is definitely controversy when it comes to Michael Jacobshagen. Michael Jacobshagen was selling fake memorabilia, or at least it was reported that he was selling fake memorabilia with fake signatures that were believed that he actually penned himself. So when we look at this, we have to really take it with a little bit more of a harder look and have that information in mind. But the book supposedly was verified by an individual who was an expert in handwriting analysis and signatures, who stated that the signatures were authentic. So let's take a look at this particular video and see what was said about this particular book and Michael Jacobshagen's relationship with Michael Jackson.
Young Michael Jacobshagen went home to Germany, but Jackson didn't forget his new friend.
This was a Christmas letter, what he's sending to me. To my friend Michael, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. See you very soon. I love you. Love, Michael Jackson. This was from Christmas 1997. Yes.
Jackson continued courting Michael from the other side of the world with tenderly worded notes and letters.
One of them is from Neverland, what he sent it to me. This was after 1998. He writing, Michael, I truly miss you very much. Thanks for your loyalty and support. I wait for you at Neverland. All my love, always, Michael Jackson.
How many of these letters did he send you?
30, 35.
Those letters culminated in an invitation to join Jackson on a leg of his History World Tour. That's Michael with his idol waving from a hotel window in Berlin.
Tell me about the very first sleepover with Michael Jackson. What happened?
First, it was just to sleeping, so sometimes sleeping also another kids in the bed. It was not just me.
And what would happen in the bed?
I mean, watching all this Peter Pan, I don't know how many times I watched Peter Pan. I can't watch anymore because I watch, I don't know how many, 70, 100 times, and all this time with Michael. It was absolute his favorite, yeah, because he say he is Peter Pan.
When did you first spend your night on your own with Michael Jackson?
This was in 1998.
Would there be any contact between his body and your body?
Yes. I mean, we was together, our bodies was together. I was on this side and he was behind me and he put his arm around me.
Pressed up against you?
Yes.
Was there ever anything sexual that happened between you?
The bodies together, you know? The bodies, that's why he also my rubber friend, you know? I mean...
What does that mean?
Rubber is that you put your two bodies together, you know?
As in rubbing up against each other?
Yes, this is exactly what is rubber.
You know, to hear these accusers, it almost sounds like a love affair. Michael Jackson, according to them, loved to hug and kiss and snuggle and bounce him up and down on his knee and call him Rubber and give him cute nicknames and give him gifts just like any paramour. But they say as the time went on, this grooming, as they call it, escalated.
Michael Jacobshagen was no longer just a fan. He was Michael Jackson's special friend. The relationship stepped up a level.
Was Michael Jackson ever naked around you?
Yes, when we was in the jacuzzi.
He would fully strip off?
Yes. He was naked in the jacuzzi and then he asked me also and say, you can do the same if you want. And I say to him, no, I don't want that. And he say, you can do it like me. Yeah, there's no problem.
There's a lot of people out there who are motivated because they see Michael's vast estate and they want a piece of that. That's not the motivation for you.
I don't want a piece of the estate, no.
You don't want any money from Michael Jackson's estate?
No.
What sets Michael's claims apart from all the others is that he has physical proof to back up what he is saying.
It's a book called The Boy. This is a book with naked boys, completely naked boys inside. And this is what he gave it to me as a present. This was one of the pages here.
What does that say?
To Michael J, my friend, your rubber friend, MJ.
On the opposite page there, Michael, is an image of a boy. He looks, 8 or 9 years old and is totally naked.
Yeah, this is, is a naked boy, yeah. You see the same what I see? Because I see it now the first time. Take the book and look the pictures. I never saw that. You see something? Because I saw it now the first time.
It's circled.
Yes.
You know, quite clearly you can see here there's a circle that's been drawn around the boy's backside. There's also, I don't know if you can see here, there's an arrow that's pointing up towards it as well.
I never saw that before. I see it now with the light the first time.
This is so wildly inappropriate. There are not words for it.
This is not art. This is, in my opinion, pornography.
If what you're saying is true, Michael, this is a stunning piece of evidence.
I know that also now.
You're not making it up, you're not lying.
No, absolutely not.
His verdict?
In your expert opinion, is this Michael Jackson's handwriting?
There is no doubt in my mind that Michael Jackson wrote these notes.
No doubt?
No doubt.
How certain are you?
I'm 100% certain the person who inscribed these notes is Michael Jackson.
So as I stated before, there's been some controversy with Michael Jacobs Hagen's history and accusations of forgery that were levied against him in Europe for trying to sell fake Michael Jackson memorabilia. MJ victims also had a run-in with Michael Jacobs Hagen years ago, back in, I want to say, 2013, 2014. So I do take everything he says with a grain of salt, but there's one thing I cannot take with a grain of salt, and that is the forensic expert Bart Baggett's opinion of the writing in that particular book, and how he said he was 100% sure that was Michael Jackson's writing. And with that being said, you have to ask, why would Michael Jackson give a book like that to a child? What is the purpose of doing that? And in my personal opinion, it was just another form of grooming. Back in the 1990s, there was a magazine entitled Naturally, Nude Recreation and Travel. And it was for people who were in the nudist community and wanted to find places where they could actually go or bring their families, where their particular lifestyle would be accepted, and there would be other people who had that same mindset. Now, I don't quite understand this particular lifestyle, but nudist camps and retreats are nothing new. They've been around for a very, very long time. Now, what's also interesting about this magazine is that you could actually purchase various periodicals and videos about being a nudist and their lifestyles. And in some cases, there were videotapes of families in the nude. Now, for people who were in this particular lifestyle, it was something that they would purchase to maybe look at various different nudist retreats and see if that was a place they might want to go. But for people like Michael Jackson, I think it was used for something completely different. Now, as we looked at some of the other books that Michael Jackson owned, or other periodicals that Michael Jackson owned, he was into children who were photographed in these sort of nature environments. And I've always believed that Michael Jackson was into these sort of things because he didn't want to see explicit imagery or videos of children. Michael Jackson, in my opinion, wanted to be the main center of attention. And he didn't want to look at the act maybe being done by somebody else. Now, maybe Michael Jackson may have created images with him with children, but that was different, I think, in his mind. That was something that was more pure and innocent, as he always stated. But the way around it, or the workaround for him, I think, was things like these photography books, which we talked about earlier, and these nudist magazines, where he could imagine being in that environment and how it wasn't so unseemly. This is a document, page 15, from the Sheriff's Department. And what this document is in relation to is items seized from Michael Jackson's residences. Now, this particular page I want to focus on because it relates to what we're discussing. So I'm going to read from the third paragraph, and it states, starting from the third paragraph, I should say, the last item of evidence I reviewed on this date was item number 366. This item was described as several books and magazines containing nude photographs, which were located within the master bedroom and den area. This item consisted of numerous hard copy books, softcover books, and periodicals. Within this item, there were 5 copies of a periodical titled The Nudist. Including with this was the February 1935, March 1935, May 1935, and the June, July 1935, and August 1935 issues. This item was described as being the official publication of the International Nudist Conference. These periodicals contain nude photographs of men, women, and children, as well as writings pertaining to nudism. The photographs and writings did not appear to be pornographic in nature. Also within this item was a plastic sleeve which contained numerous additional nudist-related periodicals. There were 19 copies of The Nudist, Sunshine and Health. There were also periodicals that contained photographs of nude men, women, and children, and writings which discussed nudity. None of the materials contained within these items appeared to be pornographic in nature. There's one magazine titled Slated, Universal Day Nudism from May 1961 issue. The magazine was described as being the International Journal of Nudism. The item contained photographs of nude men, women, and children, as well as writings and articles. Now, I'm bringing this up because I want people to really think about this. I don't think Michael Jackson was a nudist. The obvious reason would be because all of his pigment was destroyed, and some people believe it was naturally induced vitiligo. I personally believe it was vitiligo that was chemically induced. I believe he was taking hydroquinone, which was a bleaching treatment. It was a cream that you could use to lighten the skin, but when used excessively, it can actually induce vitiligo. But with that being said, because I don't believe Michael Jackson was a nudist or could be a nudist, I believe that these particular magazines were used for something different. I think Michael Jackson wanted to see these men, women, and children in these natural environments. And I think he wanted to see it in that way. And like Bill Dwarren stated, that these type of magazines which seem fairly harmless, but when it's a child predator that's looking at it, it becomes child erotica. The other thing is I believe that Michael Jackson, in many ways, if he had graphic pornography involving children, nobody was going to find that. And if there was any, it would probably be pornography that he produced. I think, again, he wanted to be the main a center of attention. And because I believe he wanted to have romantic relationships with these children, I think he would think that child pornography was something that just wasn't going to be viewed by him, especially involved other adults. And that's just, after all these years of research, my personal opinion. Next, we're going to listen to an interview with Vincent F. Amend and one of my favorite podcasters, Ed Opperman. And I strongly recommend, for people who don't know much about Ed Opperman or haven't listened to his interviews, I think he's one of the best podcasters on the internet. He has interviewed so many people and has so many amazing interviews. I highly recommend his podcast and to seek it out. And like I said many times, if you can become a Patreon member of Ed Opperman, I usually don't discuss these type of Patreons and things like that. But when it comes to Ed Opperman, I think you are definitely missing out. But I digress. Let's take a listen to this particular segment of this interview that the great Ed Opperman did with Vincent F. Amend, discussing the videos that he stated was ordered by Frank Cascio for Michael Jackson, and how Frank, for some reason, got into a phase of watching these videos with Michael Jackson. It's a rather interesting interview, so let's take a listen.
But then there was this, dark side to the story that was never revealed to the public, that a lot was revealed to me. During the investigation of the trial, Detective Robel went out to see Frank and me to our homes, and Frank hands me a bag, and there was a child pornography video ordering section in the magazine that was in the bag, with Sharpie circles around the videos to be ordered. So once again, I'm in this big situation with Frank and in this trial, and I go and I confront Frank, and he says, "Yeah, Vin, we sat down and we ordered, the videos were ordered. Michael circled them, the videos he wanted, he selected them, and we were going through a phase together, and we were watching these videos of naked families and naked children prance around."
So the obvious question one would have to ask is, why was Michael Jackson watching these nudist videos with Frank Cascio, who is now, him and his siblings have accused Michael Jackson of child sexual abuse? Why would Michael Jackson and him go through a phase of watching these videos? And again, I state, it's just another way of Michael Jackson grooming one of his victims to accept his particular predilections and devious behavior. The next item I would like to bring up, or items of evidence, was there were actually nude photographs found in Michael Jackson's residences. There were two photographs. One was of a child partially nude, and one was of a child fully nude, to believe to be one of Michael Jackson's close child companions. Now, again, I ask, what is the reasoning for Michael Jackson having these particular photographs? And will either of these pictures be allowed to be put into evidence? I know that Attorney John Carpenter has brought up the picture of Jonathan Spence. And it states that the photograph during legal motions, Attorney John Carpenter, who represents Michael Jackson's accusers Wade Robson and James Safechuck, submitted arguments mentioning a specific photograph seized by police from Jackson's home that depicted a naked pubescent boy with his genitals exposed in a sexually furtive pose. And I think he even went further to state that the pose was actually this particular boy cupping his genitals. So if that item is allowed into evidence, I think it's going to be one of the strongest pieces of visual evidence they may have. So this is a picture from another book that Michael Jackson owned. The book was called Room to Play, and the book depicted children morphed in some cases onto adult bodies, and in some cases those adult bodies were put in sexual poses. Now, this was a book that was found in Michael Jackson's residence, and one would have to ask, why would Michael Jackson want to have a book that literally takes children and morphs them into something else? So this is another book that Michael Jackson owns that was seized from the Neverland Ranch. It's called The Fourth Sex, Adolescent Extremes, and it deals with adolescent counterculture. Here is an example of one of the pictures that are in this book, and this book does showcase partially nude and nude adolescents. The question was why did Michael Jackson need a book about adolescence? He was far from adolescent at that point. And you have to ask again, in Michael Jackson's hands, is this just another form of child erotica? And again, here's another example of a really obscure book called Chronos that was found at Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch. And again, this book depicts men, women, and children fully nude. And what I also want to state is that all these books, really, they were not found in his library. They were found in his bedroom, in his den, in some cases in the arcade. These books were just kind of lying around with easy access in some cases, but they were not just like stuffed in this huge library that he had. Many of these books were also in easy access of children and their families. Well, here's another book that Michael Jackson had that was seized by police. It's called Dress Up, Play Acts and Fantasies of Childhood. This book also contained pictures of fully clothed, semi-nude, and nude children. It was also listed in the list of materials that was seized from Michael Jackson's home. And this particular description by one of the detectives writes, the book appeared to be a compilation of photographs that appeared to depict either preteen or early teenage individuals. Some of the pictured children were nude or semi-nude. Here is an example of one of the many magazines that Michael Jackson owned. And again, a lot of these were not easy to come by. But he seemed to have reams of these nudist magazines. And again, they portrayed both men, women, and children in the nude. Again, I think this is the type of imagery that Michael Jackson seemed to be focused on. And it was this idea of innocence and nature. But unfortunately, Michael Jackson was a child predator. So these images took on a whole new meaning. This man is named Harrison Funk. He is a photographer that has worked for Michael Jackson for years. He first met Michael Jackson back in the Victory Tour days with the Jacksons. This segment I think I'm going to be calling What the Funk. And after you hear this audio clip, you may understand why. The trial that's coming up in 2026, which is really going against the corporations of Michael Jackson, and also discussing how in many ways there are enablers who, whether intentionally or unintentionally, turned a blind eye to what was right in front of them. just because they were dealing with somebody who maybe they admired or they just thought was a creative genius, but not understanding behind that genius was still an individual who in many ways was a flawed individual. Now let me play you this short audio clip, which comes from an interview of Harrison Funk. I believe it was the MJ Cast that did this interview. And then I will give you some of my thoughts on this particular audio clip.
The whole 93 scandal broke in the middle of the tour. Yep. So you would have been a percipient witness to the whole thing. So, I mean, what was going on there?
I was in Neverland shooting something, and Jordan Chandler was there. And I have a picture somewhere of Michael patting Jordan's head. Jordan's wearing a baseball cap. In this picture. You know, and the scandal breaks 3 weeks later. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, what a horrible situation, you know.
Just thinking about when the news broke around those allegations with Jordan Chandler, a much lesser man would have sold that image of Michael patting Jordan Chandler on the head. Imagine how much that would have been worth at that moment.
That image, by the way, is kept under lock and key so that in case anything happens to me, it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, even today. And I mean that sincerely. There are people who have seen it. I had conversations at the time with some of Michael's people about what we want to do to kill and suppress those images. We did. We suppressed all sorts of, you know, there was a photo shoot that I did of Jordan that Michael paid for. We killed it. It's gone. Doesn't exist.
So the obvious questions I would have is if you have a picture of Michael Jackson patting Jordan Chandler in a very innocent way on the head while he's wearing a baseball cap, why would that need to be under lock and key? There are many, many pictures of Michael Jackson and even video with him of Jordan Chandler. This is 2025. There's no need to keep that picture under lock and key and to be worried about that picture if something happens to you. If it's a very innocuous picture, there's nothing to really even be bothered by. Why not just release it? Unless this picture is more like the pictures we've seen earlier, and maybe there's an artistic reason why it's not being released. I really don't know. I can only speculate. The next thing I have questions for is that Michael Jackson had paid for a photo shoot. And instead of thinking to yourself, well, you know, my responsibility in this situation, now that there are allegations in regards to Michael Jackson harming a child, where the child really has no power in this situation, isn't really to Michael Jackson's people or to even Michael Jackson at that point. Shouldn't that, if you're searching for the truth, shouldn't you not be in fear of releasing anything that Michael Jackson had paid for, especially a photo shoot? Why not just say, you know what, these photos were taken. I'm not going to do anything unless law enforcement sees this. I don't know what type of information maybe they could gather from this. It just seems really strange that you would go to them and ask them, what do we need to do? And the response is to kill the images. Make sure they never seen the light of day. It just doesn't make any sense. And then you also stated that there were other things that you knew that you needed to suppress. There's just so many questions. The other question I would have is is why did Michael Jackson have a need to have a photo shoot with Jordan Chandler? Jordan Chandler wasn't an actor. He wasn't a dancer. He wasn't really a public figure at all. Why did Michael Jackson need to hire you to produce a photo shoot? And what were those pictures of? You know, in this particular video, we had looked at a lot of what many people called artistic, just very innocent pictures. But yet, when you go beyond the surface, you can see there's so much more to these photography books and nudist magazines and just pictures taken from a Polaroid camera. That there's so much more to this. But yet, you felt the right thing to do was to make sure those pictures never seen the light of day. I just find that rather disgusting. Again, that's my personal opinion. If there is a child that might be harmed, as a society, our first responsibility is to make sure that we know that any information we have is forthcoming to the people that might be able to help that child. And this idea that somehow you know that these pictures are going to be used in a negative way or in a devious way by law enforcement or by the media is irrelevant. You had no idea what those pictures could actually mean. In that case, you have no idea, even if it established a timeline, or maybe Jordan described some things in those pictures, you have zero idea what it could have meant. And the only reason I think that was acceptable is because I don't think law enforcement probably even knew those pictures existed. So they couldn't have requested those pictures or had you put them into evidence. The reality is my personal opinion, Mr. Funk, is that the interview that was done, it looks like it was done 6 years ago in 2019. It seems like you were trying to let the Michael Jackson fandom know that you were behind Michael Jackson and that you did an honorable thing. And that all these years later, you're going to tell this story and you're going to make sure people understood that you worked with Michael Jackson and the Michael Jackson machine, as I call it, to make sure that if there was anything possible that was going to harm Michael Jackson, you were going to make sure that it never seen the light of day, and his people were going to make sure it never seen the light of day. In my opinion, that's nothing to be proud of. There is a case that's coming in 2026. Maybe, just maybe, somebody will hear this and request that picture that's under lock and key. Or maybe request the negatives that you might still have, or maybe you don't have, of that photo shoot. Or maybe you, Mr. Funk, might just do an honorable thing and hand those pictures over to Attorney John Carpenter, who's representing these two men that are going up against the Michael Jackson corporations. Since 2019, maybe you don't realize, Mr. Funk, now 11 accusers, and now 7 multi-million-dollar settlements. That same estate, those same people that probably worked with you to make sure those images never saw the light of day, didn't even believe strongly enough. Very shortly after leaving Neverland, they paid 5 other people off quietly, buying their life rights. So their stories never seen the light of day. You need to realize that you might have backed the wrong horse here. And maybe it's time to be on the right side of history. And if those pictures mean nothing, they mean nothing. But at least you are giving those pictures a chance to be examined, or that picture a chance to be examined to see if it means anything besides what you think it might mean. You weren't in that bedroom. You weren't behind those closed doors like none of us were. So this idea that somehow you know that these allegations are all bogus is bogus.
Because there wasn't one piece of information that says I did that. In any way, they turned my room upside down, went through all my books, all my videotapes, all my private things, and they found nothing that can say Michael Jackson did this. Nothing.
But let me ask you
to
a
this
couple
day,
of questions.
nothing. Still nothing.
Let me ask
nothing,
you a couple.
nothing.
And they presented no evidence of criminal conduct on Jackson's part. The files have been declassified and you can view them yourself. They include a raid of his home where they confiscated all electronics. This is their ID number that you'll see. We're talking computers, hard drives, cell phones, where they say the amount of gigabyte. And then following are pages like this where they have the ID of declassified and you can view them yourself. They include a raid of his home where they confiscated all electronics. This is their ID number that you'll see. We're talking computers, hard drives, cell phones, where they say the amount of gigabyte. And then following are pages like this where they have the ID of the different devices and they all say nothing. Literally, they all say this. They found nothing.
No, Mr. Ian Carroll, you found nothing. Probably because you didn't even bother to look, or you're just a piss-poor researcher. You know, our motto surviving Michael Jackson is, we don't dabble in topics, we do the deep dive. And I hope you enjoyed the deep dive tonight for our episode of Nocturnal Admissions, episode 6, Michael Jackson, the Books of Lies. As always, I want to thank you for watching our very, very, very small channel here. We might not have the millions upon millions of subscribers or the huge reach, but what we do have is good information. And that information is so important to get to other people. And that's why we have some housekeeping here. Please like, share, subscribe, and like our motto always says, get involved. Share these videos to other people, share the links. And we are doing our best to give you good information. The other thing I do want to mention is, like I said in many episodes, the civil trial is happening in 2026. We are less than a year away if it is actually going to happen in November of 2026. And I think a lot of people will probably be seeking out this information. So that's why it's so important to, again, like, share, subscribe, and comment on these videos. It does actually help the algorithm, and it does get to more people. But as always, I want to thank you again for watching our small channel here, and you have a great evening. And here is one of our other videos we have. Also part of our Nocturnal Admission series. Like I said, we are here at episode 6. So there are 5 other episodes if you want to watch, and a whole bunch of other videos and live streams if you want to binge our channel. Here is a short preview of one of our other videos from Nocturnal Admissions called PYT, Pretty Young Thing. In this first episode in the series Nocturnal Admissions, we are going to be looking at a misconception in regards to the Michael Jackson allegations. And the biggest misconception is that Michael Jackson only abused little boys. We're going to be looking at the argument that he may have actually abused little girls as well. It just wasn't so front and center. So I ask you to please take a journey with me as we, in our first episode called PYT, Pretty Young Things, in our series Nocturnal Admissions.
I hope she forgives me for telling this story. Okay, Tatum, please forgive me. I remember her telling me to come over to the house, to her house. They have a Beverly Hills house too. And what she's going to do to me when I come. You know, all the...
Well, what did she say?
All the sexual stuff. So I'm scared to death.
So she rings you and says, Michael, come to my house. I'm going to make love to you.
Yeah.
And you're really scared?
I'm scared. Scared because I've never done anything like that. I came over there trying to be Mr. Big Shot and brave. I remember she cut off all the lights in her bedroom, opened the curtains. You can see the whole skyline of the city over the cliff. It was beautiful. And she told me to go over and lie on the bed, and I did. I laid on the bed. And she slowly walked over, and she touched the button of my shirt to open it, and I did my hands like this, and I wouldn't let them down. And she just walked away. She knew I was too shy for it. That's what happened.
Did you not feel tempted at all? You just felt frightened.
I was frightened. I was afraid. I didn't think I was ready for that.
What we just watched in that video was a recollection from Michael Jackson, and he was being interviewed by Martin Bashir. What he was recalling was a situation where he was invited over to his girlfriend's house, and she invited him into her bedroom on her bed and then tried to, according to Michael Jackson, undress him. And Michael Jackson recoiled and said, "Oh, no, I'm not ready for this." What doesn't get asked, though, in that interview, which really should have, was how old was Tatum O'Neal, he's referring to? She was a young actress at the time. And how old was Michael Jackson? Well, Michael Jackson was 17 and Tatum O'Neal was 12. The reason this particular piece of this interview is so important is because it shows his mindset. What we're seeing is a man that's now in his 40s discussing how a 12-year-old invited him over. A 12-year-old tried to seduce him and unbutton his shirt, and he was the innocent one. It was the 12-year-old's idea to engage in this sort of activity. Now, according to Tatum O'Neal, she has a totally different recollection of these events. It stated that Michael Jackson has a vivid imagination, but she also states in her autobiography, A Paper Life, something even more disturbing, which we will look at right now.